I'm Ethan Vance. I'm 34 years old, and my own father once told me I was no longer part of the family, via a text message. Before I tell you how that single text led to 78 missed calls, a frantic company accountant, and the potential collapse of a multi-million-dollar business, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know who's out there listening. It all started at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I was sitting at my kitchen table, looking over some logistics reports for the family business Vance Auto Care. It was a normal night. The low hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic. My phone buzzed on the countertop, a sharp, intrusive sound in the quiet. I glanced at the screen. It was from my dad. My heart did that familiar little jump it always did when he contacted me directly. It was a mix of hope and anxiety, the kind you get when you've spent your whole life seeking approval from a man who hands it out like it's rationed. I picked up the phone. The message was short. No greeting, no explanation, just 7 words, all caps, like an order barked from across a workshop. Don't come to the family reunion. I stared at it. A second message popped up before I could even process the first one. We're cutting ties. And that was it. My finger hovered over the screen. I think a part of me was supposed to feel rage or a deep, shattering shock. Maybe I was supposed to break down, call him, demand to know what I'd done. But I didn't. Instead, a strange calm washed over me. It was the kind of stillness you feel in the eye of a hurricane, when the wind stops screaming and for a moment, there's just silence. It wasn't the shock of the new. It was the quiet confirmation of what I had secretly known my entire life. I was an outsider in my own family. I had been a good son, a loyal employee, the responsible one. I had sacrificed my own ambitions, my own credit, my own peace of mind for them. For nothing. My thumbs moved with a precision that felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. Someone colder, more decisive. I typed back a single word. Understood. I hit send. Then I put the phone down, screen facing down on the table. I walked over to my laptop, opened it, and navigated to the online portal for our business banking. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Loan number 74B, 3981. A $2.5 million expansion loan for Vance Auto Care. A loan that only existed because my name and my perfect credit score were co-signed on it. I found the button I was looking for, Manage Co-Applicants. I clicked it. A confirmation box appeared. Are you sure you want to initiate the process to remove yourself as a guarantor for this loan? This action is irreversible and may trigger an immediate review of the loan terms. I didn't hesitate. I clicked Confirm. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen. It was done. I closed the laptop. For the first time in years, I breathed. It was a deep, shuddering breath of clean, cold air. I didn't know what would happen next, not exactly. But as my phone began to buzz again, and then again and again, lighting up with calls from my mother, my brother, and numbers I didn't recognize, I knew one thing for sure. The wall they had built their kingdom on was about to come crashing down. And I was the one who had just pulled out the first brick. To understand why I could do that, why I could sever a tie so cleanly, you have to understand the family I grew up in. My father, Warren Vance, was a man carved from granite and motor oil. He built Vance Auto Care from a single garage he inherited from his own father into a regional powerhouse. He was a force of nature, and his word was law. His favorite saying, the one he'd drill into us over dinner, was, "We don't hire outsiders. We raise replacements." It sounded noble, like he was building a legacy. But in reality, it was a cage. And in that cage, there were 2 very different animals. First, there was my older brother, Rhett. 3 years my senior, Rhett was the golden child. He had our father's charisma. A bright, easy smile that could sell a warranty to a man who didn't own a car. He was reckless, charming, and utterly untouchable. He was the replacement my father wanted, a mirror image of himself but shinier. Rhett was the one taken to business lunches, the one whose photo was in the local paper, shaking hands with the mayor. He was the heir apparent. And then there was me. I was the other replacement, the quiet one, the one who kept the lights on. My childhood wasn't about Little League or summer camp. It was about work. At 12 years old, while Rhett was at football practice, I was in the back office of the main shop, my eyes burning from the green glow of the monitor, logging tire shipments into QuickBooks. My dad said it was building character. At 16, I spent my entire spring break not at the beach, but managing payroll because our bookkeeper had quit without notice. I found a $3,000 error that would have cost us dearly. My father's only comment was, "Good. Don't make that mistake again." There was no thank you. There was never a thank you. It was just my job. Rhett's job was to be the face of the company. My job was to be its spine, unseen, unthanked, but absolutely essential. I was the one who streamlined the inventory system, who negotiated better rates with our suppliers, who handled the messy, unglamorous logistics that allowed Rhett to swagger around the showroom floor. He got the glory. I got the spreadsheets. My mother, Lynette, was a ghost in this machine. She had faded into her role as the supportive wife of a powerful man. When I'd try to talk to her, to tell her I felt invisible, she'd just pat my hand, her eyes distant. "Your father's building something for all of us, Ethan," she'd say in a soft, placating voice. "Be grateful, sweetheart. Don't cause waves." But the waves were already there under the surface. I saw them every time Rhett would come to my father with some harebrained, expensive idea for marketing, and my father would approve it without a second glance. I saw them every time a major operational problem landed on my desk, a problem created by Rhett's carelessness, and I was expected to fix it before Dad found out. I remember one Thanksgiving I was about 19. I just spent 72 hours straight redesigning the entire workflow for our largest service bay to increase efficiency by 20%. It was a huge win. I was proud. At dinner, I tried to explain what I'd done. My father listened with half an ear, then clapped Rhett on the shoulder. "And Rhett here just closed a deal for 10 new fleet vans with the city. That's my boy." Rhett hadn't closed the deal. He'd played a round of golf with the deputy manager. I had spent 6 weeks preparing the proposal, running the numbers, and creating the service package that actually won the contract. Rhett just delivered it with a smile. I looked across the table, at the turkey and the gravy and the smiling faces, and I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's family. My father turned to me and said, "See, Ethan? Rhett handles the people. You handle the paper. That's how it works." He wasn't raising 2 sons. He was forging 2 tools, each for a different purpose. And I was beginning to understand that one tool was destined for the trophy case, and the other was meant to be worn down to a nub and then discarded. I just didn't know how soon that day would come. The moment everything shifted from a quiet resentment to a ticking time bomb happened 2 years ago. My father had decided it was time to expand. A massive new flagship location that would double our footprint. It was an ambitious plan, and it came with an ambitious price tag, $2.5 million. The bank was willing to play ball, but there was a catch. The business's current debt-to-income ratio was too high. They needed a secondary applicant, a co-signer with a rock-solid financial history, to guarantee the loan. The family gathered in my father's oversized office. The air was thick with the smell of leather and my father's cologne. He laid out the situation like a general planning a battle. "The bank's being cautious," he said, his voice clipped. "They need a guarantor." All eyes, for a brief moment, went to Rhett. My brother just shrugged, a charming, helpless smile on his face. "Guys, you know my situation. A few bad investments, that mess with the condo, my credit's shot." He said it so casually, as if his financial irresponsibility was just a quirky personality trait. He'd racked up tens of thousands in personal debt, something I knew because I'd seen the frantic calls from collectors that our receptionist had to field. My father waved a dismissive hand. "We know." He didn't want to risk his own personal assets beyond what was absolutely necessary. He had a complex web of trusts and holdings designed to protect his wealth. That was always his way. Maximum control, minimum personal risk. Then, every eye in the room landed on me. I had been careful with my money my whole life. My salary from the company wasn't extravagant, but I saved. I invested wisely. I had no debt, a pristine credit score over 800, and a healthy personal portfolio. I was, in the bank's eyes, the perfect candidate. "Ethan," my father said, his voice softening just a fraction, the way it did when he needed something. You're the only one who can do this. It's for the family. For the legacy. My mother chimed in, her voice earnest. It's your name on the building too, sweetheart. I looked at their faces. My father, expectant. My mother, pleading. Rhett, looking bored, already thinking about the new office he'd get. In that moment, a stupid, foolish part of me thought, this is it. This is my chance. I thought that if I did this one huge, undeniable thing, they would finally have to see me. They would finally have to acknowledge what I brought to the table. I still believed that loyalty could earn you a seat at that table. So I said yes. The next day, I sat in a cold, sterile room with the bank's loan manager and their lawyer. I signed dozens of pages. Each stroke of the pen felt heavy. I was personally guaranteeing a $2.5 million loan. If the business failed, if my father and brother ran it into the ground, it would be my financial future on the line. My savings, my investments, everything I had built for myself would be gone. When I got back to the office, the documents tucked into my briefcase, I expected something. A handshake, a thank you, acknowledgement, nothing. My father was on the phone yelling about a shipment. Rhett was laughing with one of the sales guys. It was as if nothing had happened. They didn't thank me. They didn't even mention it. They just assumed it was my job. The quiet, reliable tool had done what it was designed to do. That night, I went home and felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I had just bet my entire life on a family that saw me as little more than a safety net. And for the first time, I started to seriously wonder what would happen when that net was the only thing holding them up, and I was the one who decided to let go. For a few months after I signed the loan documents, things were deceptively quiet. Construction on the new site began, and a fresh wave of optimism filled the air at Vance Auto Care. I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, that my sacrifice was a worthy investment in our shared future. But the knot in my stomach never really went away. The first tangible sign of trouble came during a budget meeting about 6 months later. I was presenting the quarterly financials, pointing out areas where we were over budget. I flagged one particular item, a $12,000 invoice for consulting services from a company I'd never heard of. The invoice was vague, with no breakdown of hours or services rendered. "What's this, Rhett?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "This invoice was submitted under your department." Rhett leaned back in his chair, looking unconcerned. "Oh, it's from a friend of mine. He's helping us with some new marketing strategies." A $12,000 marketing strategy with no proposal, no contract, and no deliverables? Pressed. "We have a process for this. This is exactly the kind of expense we need to control." My father, who had been silent, slammed his hand on the table. Not hard, but just enough to make the coffee mugs jump. "Enough, Ethan." I turned to him, surprised. "I'm just pointing out a major discrepancy. This is my job." "Your job," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "is to make the numbers work, not to question your brother. Rhett is out there making connections. You're in here counting paper clips. Stop acting like an outsider." The word hit me like a physical blow. Outsider. The one thing I had spent my entire life trying not to be. I looked at Rhett, who was smirking, a little victory glinting in his eyes. I looked at my mother, who was staring intently at her notepad, refusing to meet my gaze. In that moment, I realized my signature on that loan hadn't bought me a seat at the table. It had just chained me to the leg of it. That afternoon, I confided in my childhood friend, David Chun. David had worked in our IT department for years. We grew up together, our dads were old friends. I trusted him. I told him how frustrated I was, how I felt like I was being pushed out, even after everything I'd done. "It's crazy, man," I said, sitting in the break room. "I'm on the hook for millions, and I'm treated like the enemy for asking about a single invoice." David listened, nodding sympathetically. "I get it, Ethan. It's not right. You deserve more respect." I felt a small sense of relief. At least someone understood. The very next morning, I tried to log into the main accounting software to follow up on that invoice. A small, cold box popped up on my screen. Access denied. I tried again. Same result. I tried to access the primary bank accounts. Access denied. My permissions, the ones I had used to manage the company's finances for over a decade, had been revoked. I knew immediately what had happened. There was only one person besides me who knew how deeply I was questioning things. David. He must have gone straight to Rhett, or worse, my father, to score points. The betrayal was so swift, so absolute, it left me breathless. I felt a fool. That evening, I didn't go home. I stayed late, using the old, unrestricted admin login I had set up years ago as a failsafe. I started a new folder on a heavily encrypted external hard drive. I copied everything. Old financial statements, supplier contracts, payroll records, every email I had ever sent or received that had a $sign in it. I named the folder Shadow Ledger. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it, but I knew one thing with chilling certainty. The people I had tied my future to were not my family. They were my adversaries, and I needed to be prepared for the war that was coming. The weeks following my lockout were a masterclass in psychological warfare. On the surface, nothing changed. My family was cordial, almost sickeningly so. My father would nod at me in the hallways. Rhett would slap me on the back and ask how I was doing. My mother would call to remind me about Sunday dinner. It was a carefully constructed illusion of normalcy, designed to make me feel like I was the one who was crazy, that I had imagined the whole thing. But my access was never restored. When I asked about it, my father gave me a breezy, dismissive answer. "We're restructuring the financial oversight, son. Gordon can handle the day-to-day. You need to focus on the big picture, on operations." Gordon Maddox was our company accountant, a man who had been with my father for 30 years. He was competent, but he was also terrified of my father. He wouldn't question a penny if Warren or Rhett told him it was legitimate. I was being sidelined, put into a box where I could still do the work but couldn't see the money. They wanted my brain and my labor, but not my oversight. So I went deeper into the shadows. My workdays became a performance. I was Ethan Vance, the diligent COO, optimizing supply chains and managing the service teams. But at night, after everyone had gone home, I became an archaeologist, digging through the digital ruins of my own company. My old admin login was a ghost key. It let me see but not touch. I couldn't alter records, but I could copy them. Every night, I would meticulously download files. Balance sheets, expense reports, transaction logs. I organized them, cross-referenced them, building a mirror image of the company's finances on my secure drive. My shadow ledger grew, file by file. It was lonely, draining work. The silence of the office at 2 a.m. was immense, broken only by the hum of the servers. Some nights, I'd just sit there, staring at the numbers on the screen, feeling the weight of the betrayal. I had helped build this place. My sweat was in its foundation, and now I was a thief in my own house, stealing information that should have been mine by right. One evening, as I was leaving late, I nearly ran into Maria Flores, one of our longest-serving administrative assistants. She was a quiet, kind woman who had always had a soft spot for me. She'd seen me grow up in that office. She gave me a sad, knowing look. "Working late again, Ethan? Always something to do, Maria," I said, trying to sound casual. She hesitated, then stepped closer. She glanced down the empty hallway before speaking in a low voice. "They're not right what they're doing to you. Your grandfather, he would not have approved." I just nodded, my throat tight. The next morning, a plain manila envelope was on my desk. There was no note. Inside was a printout of an old archived email chain from 3 years ago. It was between my father and Rhett. In it, they were discussing a serious cash flow issue Rhett had created by losing nearly $50,000 on a can't-miss stock tip. My father was furious, but the email ended with him saying he would bury it in the marketing budget over the next year. It was concrete proof of a cover-up. Maria had given me a gift, a dangerous one. She was taking a huge risk. It confirmed my suspicions. I wasn't just being sidelined. I was being intentionally blinded because they had things to hide. Big things. I scanned the document and added it to the shadow ledger. I realized my secret project was no longer just about self-preservation. It was about finding the truth, no matter how ugly it was and no matter where it led. For months, I continued my nightly ritual. The shadow ledger grew from a folder into a fortress of data. I started noticing small, troubling patterns. Expenses from Rhett's department were consistently 15 to 20% over budget, but the overages were always recategorized at the end of the quarter, shuffled into vague buckets like general and administrative or promotional expenses. It was sloppy, but deniable. The real bombshell dropped on a Tuesday night in March. I was running a comparison between the loan payment schedule the bank had on file and our internal payment records. That's when I saw it. A discrepancy that made the blood drain from my face. Our company had missed 2 of the last 4 quarterly payments on the $2.5 million loan. My mind raced. How was that possible? A default would trigger immediate penalties, maybe even a seizure of assets. The bank would have been all over us. But there had been no frantic calls, no threatening letters. I dug deeper, pulling up all correspondence with the bank's loan manager, Mr. Henderson. And there it was in a series of email exchanges. Our company accountant, Gordon, had requested an extension for the first missed payment, citing a temporary supply chain disruption. For the second, he had requested another. The bank had reluctantly agreed both times, but their approval email contained a chilling sentence. Approval is granted based on the continued strength of the secondary guarantor's financial profile. They were using me. They were leveraging my perfect credit score, my financial stability, to get extensions on a loan they were already failing to pay. They were actively defaulting and using my good name as a shield, all without my knowledge. I was the cosigner, but I was the last to know. The rage that hit me was cold and sharp. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. This was fraud. Fueled by adrenaline, I started a forensic search. I cross-referenced every vendor payment Rhett had authorized for the past year with state business registries. The consulting fees I had questioned months ago, they were going to a shell corporation, an LLC that listed Rhett's college roommate as the sole officer. Over $40,000 in the last year alone, for services that never happened. It got worse. I found entries labeled marketing testing. They coincided perfectly with dates Rhett had posted pictures on his social media from Las Vegas and Miami. There were no campaigns, no reports, just invoices from the same shell company. He was using the business as his personal ATM. I found fleet repair invoices that were triple billed to us and the manufacturer under warranty. I found fuel expenses for vehicles that had been sold months prior. And then, the final, most personal violation. I found a series of documents, minor contract amendments, vendor agreements, all bearing my initials. They were sloppy forgeries, clearly not my handwriting. They had been signing my name, binding me to agreements I had never seen. I leaned back in my chair, the darkened office seeming to close in around me. The scope of it was staggering. This wasn't just a mismanaged company. It was a criminal enterprise. And that $2.5 million loan I had guaranteed? It wasn't an investment in a family legacy. It was a lifeline they were using to keep their sinking ship afloat just a little longer, and I was the one they had chained to the anchor. My loyalty hadn't just been taken for granted. It had been weaponized against me. I closed my laptop, the quiet click echoing in the empty room. The time for digging was over. It was time to find a weapon of my own. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 15 years. I drove 2 towns over to a quiet cafe with dark wood and the rich smell of coffee. I was meeting Danielle Keller. We had been in the same study group in college, before she went on to law school and became a partner at a top corporate law firm in the city. I hadn't seen her in years, but I followed her career. She was smart, tough, and the last person you'd ever want to face in a negotiation. Right then, she was exactly the person I needed. She slid into the booth opposite me, looking sharp in a tailored blazer. "Ethan Vance," she said with a warm smile. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," I said. "I've seen my family's books." I laid it all out. I didn't hold back. I told her about the loan, the lockout, the shadow ledger. I pulled out my encrypted hard drive and my laptop. For over an hour, I walked her through the forged initials, the shell corporation, the missed loan payments, the bank extension secured using my credit profile without my consent. She listened intently, her expression shifting from friendly curiosity to razor-sharp focus. She didn't interrupt. She just absorbed every detail, her eyes scanning the documents I showed her. When I was finished, she was silent for a full minute, just looking at the evidence on the screen. Finally, she looked up at me, and her gaze was hard as steel. "Okay," she said, her voice low. "First, from a legal perspective, they've committed multiple forms of fraud. Bank fraud, wire fraud, possible tax evasion. You are not just a victim here. You're an unwilling participant in their crimes, and your signature is on the primary loan that's funding it all. You have to get out. Now." A wave of validation washed over me. I wasn't crazy. It was as bad as I thought. "How?" I asked. "What do I do? Do I confront them? Do I threaten to go to the authorities?" Danielle shook her head, a grim smile on her lips. "No, that's what they'd expect. A big, emotional family blow-up. It gives them time to react, to hide assets, to paint you as the disgruntled, emotional son. We are not going to do that." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You don't win this by screaming, Ethan. You win this with silence. Think of their entire business as a brick wall. Your credit, your name on that loan, it's not just one of the bricks. It's the cornerstone holding the whole damn thing up. If you start yelling, they'll see you coming and they'll prop it up with something else. They'll find another way." She paused for effect, letting her words sink in. "So," she continued, "you don't confront them. You don't warn them. You don't scream. You just walk up, quietly, and you pull the brick. You just move the one piece that's holding up their entire world, and you let it fall." I stared at her, the simplicity and brutality of it taking my breath away. "Just pull my name from the loan?" "Exactly," she confirmed. "You have every legal right to. The loan agreement will have a clause for guarantor withdrawal. It will trigger an immediate review and, given the missed payments you've shown me, likely a full freeze of their operating accounts. You'll also send a certified letter to the bank, with me CC'd, formally stating you are withdrawing and that you believe fraudulent activity has occurred, attaching a few key pieces of evidence. That protects you from future liability. You do it cleanly, you do it quietly, and you do it without a single word to your family." She sat back, taking a sip of her coffee. "Let them wake up one morning and find that the ground beneath their feet is gone. That's how you take your power back." I left that cafe with a clear head for the first time in months. I had a plan. A cold, quiet, and devastatingly effective plan. The time for being a loyal son was over. It was time to be a strategist. That night, I went home and felt a fundamental shift inside me. The fear and anger that had been churning in my gut for months had cooled, solidifying into something hard and clear. Resolve. I was no longer a victim waiting for the next blow to fall. I was a man with a mission. I opened my laptop and navigated to the encrypted drive. I looked at the folder name, Shadow Ledger. Felt wrong now. It spoke of darkness, of hiding. That wasn't what this was anymore. This was about bringing things into the light. I right-clicked the folder and renamed it. Redemption Plan. My redemption, not theirs. Following Danielle's advice to the letter, I began to execute the plan with the same methodical precision I used to streamline warehouse logistics. There would be no wasted movements, no emotional mistakes. Just a series of calculated, irreversible actions. First, the bank. I logged into the online loan portal. For 2 years, this page had been a source of anxiety, a symbol of my bondage. Tonight, it was my key. I navigated to the Manage Co-Applicants section. My name was there, listed beside my father's company, linked together. I stared at the Withdraw as Guarantor button. It looked so small, so insignificant on the screen, but I knew it was a detonator. My hand was steady as I moved the mouse. I thought of my father's text. "We're cutting ties." He had no idea how thoroughly I was about to honor his request. I clicked the button. The confirmation box appeared, the same one I'd seen before. "This action is irreversible. This time, the words felt like a promise. I clicked, confirm. The little green checkmark felt like a flag of victory. Step 1 was complete. Second, the evidence. I opened a new email draft, addressed to Mr. Henderson, the bank's loan manager. A man I'd never met but whose name was on all the correspondence. The subject line was simple, urgent. Regarding loan #74B 3981, Vance Auto Care. Danielle had told me to be concise and factual. No emotion. Let the documents do the talking. I wrote, "Dear Mr. Henderson, please be advised that, as of today, I have formally initiated the process to remove myself as the secondary guarantor for the above-mentioned loan. This decision has been made upon my discovery of significant financial irregularities and potential fraudulent activities related to the company's management of this loan. These activities have been conducted without my knowledge or consent. For your immediate review, I have attached 3 documents. 1. Evidence of a shell corporation receiving over $40,000 in consulting fees from company accounts. 2. Internal records showing missed loan payments that were concealed from me. 3. An example of my initials being forged on a recent vendor agreement. I believe these documents demonstrate that the terms of the loan have been violated and that my financial profile has been used to conceal the company's true financial state. I have retained legal counsel and will cooperate fully with any investigation the bank chooses to undertake. Sincerely, Ethan Vance." I attached the 3 most damning PDFs from my redemption plan folder. I took a deep breath, read the email one last time, and hit send. Step 2 was complete. The bomb was armed and the timer was set. Third, my own protection. I picked up the phone and called my personal accountant, Sabrina Kim. I had hired her a year ago specifically to keep my personal finances completely separate from the family business. It was one of the smartest things I had ever done. "Sabrina, it's Ethan," I said when she answered. "I've done it. I just pulled out of the loan." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Okay," she said, her voice all business. "Okay, Ethan. Did you follow the lawyer's advice?" "To the letter," I confirmed. "The bank has been notified. They have the preliminary evidence." "Good," she said. I could hear her typing furiously. "I'm looking at your portfolio now. Everything is secure. Your assets are in trusts that are firewalled from any business liabilities. As long as you can prove fraud and that you acted immediately upon discovering it, they can't touch you. You're clean. But Ethan, be prepared. This is going to get very, very ugly." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of a smile touch my lips. "Ugly is what I'm counting on." We spoke for another 20 minutes, going over my financial defenses, ensuring every shield was in place. When I hung up, step 3 was complete. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at the city lights. I had done it. I had pulled the brick. All that was left to do now was wait for the wall to fall. I didn't have to wait long. The first 24 hours were silent. Eerily so. No calls. No texts. Nothing. It was a false calm. The deep breath a predator takes before it strikes. I knew the email had been delivered. I knew the request to withdraw from the loan was processing. The machine was in motion, but it was happening in the silent, fluorescent-lit offices of the bank, far from view. The storm broke at 9:15 a.m. the following day, 36 hours after I hit send. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, it buzzed again. My mother again. I ignored it. Then a call from my father's office line. I ignored that too. Then Rhett. Then my father's cell. Then my mother again. My phone screen became a strobe light of their names. Call after call. A frantic, desperate barrage. I just sat there, watching them come in, one after another, a digital manifestation of their dawning panic. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt a strange, detached sense of vindication. This is what it felt like to be noticed. After the 10th call, the voicemails started. The first one was from Gordon Maddox, the company accountant. His voice was thin and reedy, stretched tight with pure terror. Ethan, pick up the phone. It's Gordon. The bank just froze everything. The main operating account, the payroll account, all of it. They're citing a guarantor review clause in the loan agreement. Mr. Henderson is calling an emergency meeting. He said something about fraudulent activity. The loan is collapsing. Ethan, the whole house of cards is coming down. We can't make payroll tomorrow. You need to call them. You need to fix this. Whatever you did, you need to undo it. Right now. I saved the voicemail. It was beautiful. Then came the texts from Rhett. The first was just 2 words. Call me. 5 minutes later, another one. What the hell did you do? Then, a flurry of them, each more unhinged than the last. The bank cut us off. This is your fault. You're overreacting. We could have handled this internally. You're destroying Dad's legacy over a few misunderstandings. Pick up the phone, you coward. I read them all, a cold smile playing on my lips. Misunderstandings. That's what he called grand larceny. Finally, my mother called again, and this time I decided to answer. I wanted to hear her voice. Ethan? She said, her voice choked with tears. Ethan, what's happening? Your father he's losing his mind. The bank won't talk to him. They said everything is frozen because of you. I kept my voice calm and even. That's correct. What did you do? She sobbed. Why would you do this to your family? My family? I replied, the words tasting like ice. That's interesting, because Dad told me I wasn't part of it anymore. Remember? There was a stunned silence on the other end. He didn't mean that. Sweetheart, he was just angry. He was clear, I interrupted, and I accepted his terms. I removed my name from the business loan. That's all. Any consequences beyond that are a result of how you, Dad, and Rhett have been running the company. But you can't just, you'll ruin us. I didn't ruin you, I said, and my voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. I just stopped being the one thing that was holding you up. I hung up the phone. By the end of the day, my call log showed 78 missed calls. 32 from my mother, 13 from my father, 7 from Rhett, and the rest from Gordon and other Panic Senior employees. They had spent my entire life making me feel invisible. Now, my absence was the only thing they could see. The text came from my father that evening. It was a command, not a request. Leona's. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. Don't be late. Leona's was our place. A classic, old-school steakhouse where we'd celebrated every major birthday and anniversary my entire life. It was a place of memories, of forced smiles and unspoken tensions over expensive cuts of meat. The choice of venue was deliberate. It was a power play, an attempt to drag me back onto their home turf, to remind me that I was a son, not a threat. They didn't get it. They still didn't get it. I arrived 15 minutes late. On purpose. They were already there, sitting in our usual corner booth. The 3 of them looked like a portrait of a family under siege. My father's face was a thundercloud, his jaw tight. My mother looked like she'd been crying for 24 hours straight. Rhett was trying to project an air of casual anger, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. I had dressed for the occasion. Not in a suit, that was their uniform. I wore a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans. I looked calm, relaxed, and in control. I slid into the booth without a word and picked up the water menu. My father broke the silence. His voice was a low growl. You think this is a game, Ethan? You want to explain why I had to spend my entire day with lawyers trying to stop my company from imploding? He used the word my company, not our. I noted that. There's nothing to explain, I said, not looking up from the menu. I received a text message informing me that my relationship with this family was terminated. I acted accordingly. By trying to destroy a 40-year legacy? He shot back. Everything I built. You're punishing it because your feelings got hurt. I finally put the menu down and looked him straight in the eye. The calm I felt was absolute. Let's be clear. Grandpa built a garage. You turned it into a business. And you and Rhett turned that business into a dictatorship built on my back. This isn't about my feelings. It's about my signature. The one you forged. The one you used to hide your debts. The one that was on a $2.5 million loan you were defaulting on. The color drained from my mother's face. Rhett scoffed, trying to sound tough. We gave you everything. A good job, a great salary. We took care of you. I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. You gave me a job. You never gave me a voice. You gave me a salary, but you used my credit as your personal safety net. You didn't take care of me. You used me. Rhett started to say something, but I held up a hand. I'm not finished. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a slim file folder. I slid it across the table. These are my formal withdrawal documents, already filed. But I thought you should have a copy. My father stared at the folder as if it were a snake. But that's not all, I said, leaning in. This was the moment, the real reason I had come. I realized that if the bank was being kept in the dark, then there was probably someone else who might be interested in the creative accounting you've been doing. So I took the liberty of putting together a little package. A greatest hits, you might say. The shell corporation, the fake invoices, the whole 9 yards. I paused, letting them hang on the words. This morning, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I submitted a formal, anonymous tip to the state auditor's office, with a full copy of my shadow ledger. The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavier than any shouting match could ever be. My mother let out a tiny, strangled gasp. Rhett looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. My father just stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. They had been prepared for a fight about the loan. They had no idea I had built a case for a full-blown criminal investigation. It was my mother who broke. The consulting fees, she whispered, looking at Rhett with wide, terrified eyes. I told you those consulting fees were a bad idea. Rhett, I told you. And there it was, the final betrayal, spoken aloud in a moment of panic. She knew. She had known all along and had said nothing. That was all I needed to hear. The last, withered shred of doubt I had, the tiny voice that wondered if I was being too harsh, died in that moment. I stood up. The meal was over before it had even begun. As I stood up from the booth, the illusion of the happy family dinner at Leona's was completely shattered. There was just the raw, ugly truth hanging in the air between us, thick as the smell of seared steak. My father's eyes, which had always held a look of command or disappointment, now held something I had never seen before, pleading. The mask of the patriarch had cracked, and for a second, I saw the scared man underneath. Ethan, he said, his voice raspy. Please. It was the first time in my 34 years he had ever used that word with me. Not as a command veiled in politeness, but as a genuine plea. The sound of it was jarring. It was the word of a man who had lost control and knew it. For a heartbeat, I almost felt a pang of something. Pity, maybe. The ghost of the little boy who just wanted his dad's approval flickered within me. But then I remembered the text message. I remembered the years of being invisible. I remembered my forged initials and the cold dread of seeing the missed loan payments. The ghost vanished. I looked down at him, my expression unreadable. Please what, Dad? I asked, my voice level. Please let you continue to use my name to commit fraud? Please continue to let Rhett bleed the company dry while I fix his messes? Please pretend I didn't see Mom's text messages to you, asking how to handle me after I started asking questions. His face went pale. He hadn't known I'd seen those. Another small gift from Maria's discreetly placed envelopes. You left me a voicemail a few years back, after I questioned Rhett's expense reports. You told me I needed to decide if I was family or an auditor, I recalled. And 2 days ago, you sent me a text message telling me we were done. You made the decision for me. I'm just agreeing with you formally. I turned to my mother. You told me not to cause waves, Mom. But you were happy to let me drown in them as long as the boat stayed steady for you and Rhett. She flinched, tears rolling down her cheeks, but she said nothing. There was nothing to say. Then I looked at my brother, who was staring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. It's all yours now, Rhett, I said with a thin, humorless smile. The legacy, the company, the debt, the audit. You're the face of the company now. Good luck. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me with every step I took through that restaurant. I walked past the bar, past the host stand, and out into the cool night air. The valet brought my car around. As I got in, I could see them through the large front window of the restaurant, still sitting in the booth, a stunned, broken tableau under the warm lighting. They weren't yelling. They weren't moving. They were just sitting there, trapped in the wreckage I had created. I drove away from Leona's for the last time, the red taillights of other cars blurring in the darkness. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt empty. But it was a clean, peaceful kind of empty. It was the emptiness of a space that had finally been cleared of a lifetime of garbage. It was the emptiness of a fresh start. I had walked into that restaurant as Ethan Vance, the son. I walked out as just Ethan. And that was more than enough. This is the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my life. Thank you for sticking with me this far. You guys are amazing. If you could do me a huge favor and like this video and comment with a 1 below, it lets me know you've been on this journey with me. It really helps more people find this story, and it lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The 6 months that followed were a strange mix of chaos and quiet. The chaos was all at a distance, a storm raging over a horizon I was no longer on. I had moved 3 states away to Portland, a city where I knew no one. The anonymity was a bomb. I rented a small apartment with a view of the misty hills and started rebuilding my life from scratch. I had been smart with my personal finances, thanks to Sabrina's guidance. I had enough saved to live comfortably for a year or 2, but I wasn't built for idleness. The part of me that loved logistics, that found a deep satisfaction in making complex systems run smoothly, was still very much alive. A friend of Danielle's put me in touch with a venture capital firm that specialized in funding women-led startups. They needed someone who could look at a new company and see not just the idea, but the operational bones, the supply chain, the financial structure, the workflow. They needed someone to tell them if the engine could actually run. They hired me as a consultant. For the first time, I was valued for exactly who I was. My meticulous nature, my obsession with details, my tendency to see the problem before anyone else. The very traits my father had dismissed as counting paper clips were now my greatest assets. My clients didn't want a charismatic frontman. They wanted the truth, and I was very, very good at finding it. Meanwhile, the news from back home trickled in through third parties. The local Business Digest published a short, carefully worded article under the headline, "Vance Auto Care Faces Financial Turmoil Amid Internal Disputes and State Audit." It mentioned a sudden restructuring of the executive team and unforeseen loan complications. It was a sanitized version of a complete catastrophe. I got angry voicemails for a few weeks. My Aunt Carol, my father's sister, called to tell me I was an ungrateful child who had destroyed my father's health. Old family friends left messages saying they couldn't believe what I'd done. That family is family, no matter what. I deleted them all without listening to the end. They were voices from a life that was no longer mine. The state audit, Danielle told me, was proceeding. It was slow, methodical, and relentless. The bank had sued the company for immediate repayment of the loan, citing the fraud clauses. Vance Auto Care was being systematically dismantled, sold off for parts to satisfy its creditors. The shiny new flagship location I had signed the loan for was an empty, half-finished shell, a monument to my family's greed. I didn't feel joy at their destruction. I truly didn't. I just felt a profound sense of quiet. The constant, low-level anxiety I had lived with my entire life was gone. The need to please, the fear of disapproval, it had all vanished. I woke up in the morning and my day was my own. My successes were my own. My future was my own. One afternoon, I was sitting in a coffee shop, reviewing a business plan for a brilliant new biotech company. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from Danielle. The subject line was just one word: done. I opened it. It was a forwarded copy of an official letter from the bank's legal department. It was full of dense legalese, but the final sentence was perfectly clear. Pursuant to the findings of our internal investigation, Mr. Ethan Vance is hereby fully and completely released from any and all financial liability and obligation related to loan #74B3981. It was over. The last chain had been broken. I was free. I closed my laptop, took a sip of my coffee, and looked out at the rain falling on the Portland streets. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally home. Just when I thought I had closed the door on my old life for good, a ghost from the past appeared in my mailbox. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope, addressed in my Aunt Carol's looping, dramatic handwriting. I almost threw it away, but a morbid curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a 4-page letter. It was exactly what I expected. A long, self-pitying lament about the tragedy that had befallen the Vance family, with me cast as the villain. She wrote about how my father had aged 10 years, how my mother cries herself to sleep every night, and how poor, heroic Rhett was doing his best to salvage what he can from the wreckage you created. It was manipulative nonsense, and I skimmed through most of it. But then one paragraph near the end caught my eye. "I don't know why you did it, Ethan," she wrote. "Your father was always so hard on you, I know. But you have to understand him. He saw himself in Rhett. Not the man he was, but the man he always wanted to be. Charismatic, daring, a real leader. He pushed Rhett so hard to be that man, to be the version of Warren Vance that could have been a CEO, not just a garage owner. He put all his dreams on Rhett's shoulders. You were always so different, so quiet and careful. He didn't know what to do with you." I read the paragraph again, and for the first time, a piece of the puzzle I had never been able to find clicked into place. It wasn't about love or favoritism in the simple sense. It was about my father's own insecurities, his own unfulfilled ambitions. He wasn't just raising a son in Rhett. He was trying to raise a better version of himself. Rhett's recklessness wasn't a flaw to him. It was daring. His charm wasn't a substitute for substance. It was leadership. Rhett was a proxy for my father's ego. And me? I was the constant, quiet reminder of his own father, the careful, methodical man who had been content with a single garage. I was a reflection of the past he was so desperate to outrun. My competence wasn't an asset. It was a threat to the fantasy he was trying to build. It didn't excuse anything. It didn't forgive the fraud, the lies, the cruelty. But it explained it. And in that explanation, I found a final, unexpected sense of release. Their issues, their toxicity, their warped sense of family, it was never about me. I was just an inconvenient character in a story my father was writing about himself. I folded the letter and put it away. It was a final echo from a world that felt a million miles away. My own world was here in Portland. It was in the challenging work I was doing, the new friendships I was slowly building, the quiet peace of my apartment. A few days later, my divorce from the Vance family became legally official in a much more tangible way. My lawyer forwarded me the final paperwork from the company's bankruptcy proceedings. My name had been cleared. The auditors had uncovered everything I had, and more. Rhett and my father were facing serious legal charges. But that was their story, not mine. My part was done. My inheritance, I knew, was gone. The business was liquidated, the family assets seized to pay off debts. But as I sat there, with nothing to my name but what I had earned myself, I had never felt richer. I hadn't inherited a company. I had inherited my own life, and it was a legacy worth far more. It's been over a year now since I left. I run my own consulting firm now, a successful one. I help passionate people build their dreams on solid foundations, ensuring they never make the same mistakes my family did. I have a life that is full and challenging and entirely my own. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my office late at night, looking out at the city lights spread before me, I think about that final text message from my father. I think about the silence that followed my one-word reply. For my entire life, I had tried to fill the silence in my family with work, with loyalty, with achievement. I thought if I just did more, worked harder, was more perfect, that maybe they would finally see me, that they would finally say the words I needed to hear. But the truth is, they never wanted my voice. They only wanted my silence and my compliance. They wanted me to be the quiet, dependable engine in the background, the one that never complained, never questioned, and was always there to bail them out. They wanted silence, obedience, and in the end, absence. Well, they got all three. What they didn't expect was that I would find my own strength in that silence. That their absence would be the fertile ground where I could finally plant my own roots. They didn't realize that by cutting me off, they weren't casting me out into the cold. They were finally opening the door of my cage and letting me fly free. The greatest irony is that by trying to make me invisible, they gave me the power to see them for who they truly were. And by taking away my voice within the family, they forced me to find it out here in the real world. My phone doesn't light up with frantic calls anymore. My inbox isn't full of passive-aggressive demands. There's just a quiet peace. It's a silence that isn't empty. It's full of potential. It's the sound of my own life, waiting to be lived. And I'm finally listening. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. It wasn't easy to share, but I believe in the power of telling our truths. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make an impossible choice to save yourself? I'd be honored to hear about it in the comments below. Please share your story, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what I have to share next. You never know, your story might be the one that gives someone else the courage they need.